the True Objective Podcast with Objectivist girl Lauren Rumpler and Liberty.me writer Calvin Thompson. The True Objective Podcast, dispelling myths about our society. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of True Objective. So we are on the second episode of the second season, and we are still talking about the history of money. So you have Lauren Rumpler, aka Objectivist Girl, here with her co-host Calvin Thompson. Say hello, Calvin.
Hi, Lauren. Hi, everybody.
And of course, today, Andrew hasn't been able to join us yet, but we're hoping he'll be able to join later in the call. But we have Steven on with us today, and Steven is it owns Amagi Metals. And help me pronounce your last name. It's McCaskill?
McCaskill.
Viking
Awesome.
name, right?
Scottish.
I'm sorry?
Oh, it's actually Scottish.
It's Scottish. Interesting. Are you very into your Scottish heritage and everything?
I know a little bit about it. My come from the MacLeod clan, and our colors are black and yellow.
Oh, wow.
Oddly enough, I have some MacLeod and McCaskill in my own family, actually. We're probably distantly related. So, yeah.
You know, those are anarchy colors, Steven.
Oh, absolutely. And our motto is hold fast.
I like it. Yeah, I live in New Hampshire, so our motto is live free or die. Which is probably the best motto ever.
Oh, yeah. I love that motto. I almost got a tattoo with that on me.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that's a lot of dedication. I don't think I've had anything in my life that I loved so much that I could get a tattoo of it.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
I mean, a lot of people are like, don't you love Ayn Rand that much? But honestly, no. I think I'm the only thing that I love enough to get tattooed on me, and I'm already tattooed on me, so it works out. So today we're talking about money and the rise of the banks. And so last episode we talked about alternate currencies and, all the lead up to banks. And so I'm going to let Calvin take it over because he's kind of our history buff and talk to us a little bit about the rise of the banks. And we're going to talk about it some more. So go ahead, Calvin.
All right. Well, the first banks were, as far as we can tell, actually religious temples. In fact, you find... Yeah, absolutely. If you recall in the Bible, I don't know how religious your upbringing was.
I was raised Catholic.
Okay, great. Then you remember the story of Jesus throwing a tantrum and...
Oh, yeah. He threw all the things up at the temple? Yeah.
Yep, because of the money lending and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was not a unique situation. That was the case with most temples throughout the ancient world, going all the way back to Mesopotamia and up into Roman times, really. But that's really not where modern banking comes from. Where it actually comes from is Renaissance Italy. You see, for most of the medieval period, Catholics were not allowed to lend money to each other with interest. It was, I believe I'm pronouncing it right, usury, which is, it was considered enough of a sin that Catholics weren't supposed to do it. And since they didn't have really any means of making a profit by loaning to people without interest, it didn't really happen. There was really no reason to do it. It was a financial risk, and there was no potential reward. But Jews, and there weren't that many of them in Europe at the time, but there were enough, had no religious prohibitions on lending money to Christians. So early on, they stepped into that role. But as I said, there weren't many of them. However, when the Turkish Empire started to rise in the east, they started fleeing to Italy. And at that same time, the Spanish Inquisition started to become a thing, and it chased all the Protestants and Jews out of Spain. And so they both sort of met in Italy, which became the big financial banking center at that time. Now, to further incentivize them to start banks, they were not allowed to own land or property. So pretty much their only means of of profiting was to either become a merchant or to become a banker, and many of them became both.
Oh, interesting. So, basically, they were not only doing trades, but they were also involved in the bank. Don't you feel like that's a little, I don't know. Doesn't that seem like they're playing two positions that they shouldn't be playing at the same time?
Also,
I don't know. When you're handling the money, should you? I mean, when you're handling everyone's money, or when you're involved in business, should you also be the person handling everyone's money? Doesn't that seem like that could just work out very badly? What do you think, Steven?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, back then they were called warehouses. They weren't even called banks. And yeah, I mean, eventually the division of labor just, amongst people, or division of labor amongst industries, and uh, over time there was a spontaneous order that I guess split the two.
Huh. Interesting. Interesting.
yeah, I know it sounds crazy juggling multiple jobs. I mean, no one does that today, right, Lauren?
No. No one named Objectivist Girl does that. I don't play 80 roles and wear 80 different hats. That's not a thing. Are you kidding me? No, I mean, I guess I could see it. It just seems like if you're handling if you're handling other people's money and you're also involved in business, don't you think that at some point you're going to be a little tempted, or maybe in those days no one was immoral, but don't you think that some of that money is going to, just happen to end up in your business?
Well, I suppose it could, but that's never not going to be a risk. I think something you got to remember too is that in the Renaissance age, there weren't that many. The middle class was still very much an up and coming phenomenon, and the poor peasants didn't have any access to banking. This was almost entirely something that the aristocracy needed, and to a limited extent, the middle class. But the other thing that led to the advancement of banking in Europe was post-Renaissance into the Enlightenment age, basically the rise of the nation state. What started happening was different countries started building empires, and with empires came organized armies. You've watched Game of Thrones. You know how warfare was conducted in medieval times.
Oh, yeah. What a great show.
Well, you would basically, if you were the monarch or the de facto ruler, whatever the case may be, you would call in on your lords who would call in on their knights, and basically you knew people who would call in more people who would call in more people. It was very much almost this pyramid scheme of raising a military. But that didn't really suffice come the Enlightenment, so people started creating organized armies, with rifles and bayonets and all that good stuff. You needed uniform equipment, and so therefore you couldn't just rely on every individual guy to bring his own types of troops. And so with organized armies like that, first off, they were extremely expensive. And the other thing was you pretty much had to field them all yourself. You couldn't rely on your nobles to do it for you. So wars became a lot more expensive than they had been in the past. And that's really where we get central banks, is there was so much demand for money and loans to the rulers of the country that central banks started to become the status quo.
Interesting. Yeah, actually, the original proposition for banks in the U.S. was created by Washington. A lot of people don't know that. So George Washington created the proposition for central banks, and during Andrew Jackson's presidency, he basically just didn't even renew the contract for it. What do you think, Stephen? Do you think this was a positive or negative thing for America?
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, I would say the, the United States played with central banking, and not only that, but with multiple currencies, both gold and silver, and they created a lot of havoc in the country early on. I mean, the Federal Reserve Bank today is the third central bank that we have, and one of the first people to advocate for having some money was Andrew Jackson in 1832.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I would say that the central banks were definitely always an issue. And I think that they came out because of big, small private banks wanting to control the money supply themselves. So their idea of a central bank was essentially a bank that was privately owned rather than a government-owned bank. And so the first and second one, that's what the big banks were pushing for. And of course, with this third bank, the Federal Reserve, it's a little bit owned by the Federal Reserve and private banks.
So basically early corporatism. Do you think it's
Yeah.
worse to have a central bank that's run entirely by the government, or to have a particular company that's in bed with the federal government so much that it has a monopoly on that kind of power?
You mean which one would be better?
Well, better or worse, however you want to phrase it. Yeah.
Lesser of two
I
evils.
don't think either. Yeah, I don't think either one is ideal. So
No, of course not.
yeah, I mean, which one might be the lesser of two evils? Um, I would say they're pretty much the same. They're both forming monopoly. One is a supposedly rent-seeking and a private company, and then the other one is, of course, government-owned. Perhaps maybe a government-owned central bank is better because the government is so inefficient in everything that they do that it would fail pretty quickly.
Now, Stephen, do you think that a lot of people make the argument that the banks would be fine if they stuck to a metal standard? And I know you're someone that owns Amagi Metals, and for those who don't know about Amagi Metals, they produce coins, right?
Correct. Well,
Right.
we retail gold and silver, platinum bullion to people around the world.
Right. And so do you think that banks would be positive and good if they're backed by a precious metal such as gold or silver? Or do you think that there are still negative aspects to having central banking?
There would definitely negative aspects.
Oh,
to
fantastic.
central
Well,
banking.
tell me
Uh,
about them.
Yeah, I mean, even while the Federal Reserve was supposedly on the gold standard, where a certain number of dollars was pegged to an ounce of gold, and initially it was $20 and then $35, and then of course in 1971 the dollar went off the gold standard. But I would say that with saying that you're on a gold standard and actually being on a gold standard are two different things, because even though we were supposedly on a gold standard and you could redeem either $35 for an ounce of gold or an ounce of gold for $35, the Federal Reserve was still printing money behind everyone's back. And of course, that came to light when the French tried to collect their gold with U.S. dollars in 1971, and the next day or the next month, Nixon said, "Oh, actually, we're not going to do this anymore. We're basically declaring our bankruptcy." And what they were really doing was printing money behind everyone's back without telling them.
Right.
So there's definitely the risk with the central bank of being on commodity or backed currency to still have a moral hazard and print money without people's knowing, because they have poor transparency.
Yeah. And actually, if Andrew were on right now, he would tell us the story about how the government asked Mises what they could do to fix the economy. And they had a meeting at the bank, and they called him over to the bank, and they were like, "Hey, what do we do to fix our economy?" And he's like, "Well, we're going to have to go to the basement." And he's like, "Okay." They're like, they're looking at him really funny. Like, this is weird, but all right, this guy's a genius. Let's go to the basement. So they go to the basement. And of course, down there are where they store all the printers for the money. And he just points at him and goes, "Shut those off. There, economy fixed." And that's really how I see it, is that we just need to smash all these machines and get rid of centralized banking. I'm with you 100%. I had suspicions that even backed by metal, they would be a negative point of our economy, and you have just confirmed it for me. So there we go. So getting back to Andrew Jackson. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something, Stephen?
Oh yeah, another thing to bring it to mind is which commodity should the dollar be backed by? And with the central government and central planners, they of course might choose something like gold. But is gold the real commodity that our money should be backed by, or should it be something like silver, which was the case for many years until we had a lot of government intervention?
But isn't there a larger amount of silver? Wouldn't it be better to be backed by gold just simply because there's less gold, and so that increases the value of every single dollar?
I don't know the answer to that. The only system that would be the free market. And for a very long time, the world was on a silver standard, and
Yes.
it worked very well. And the only reason why we stopped going, or we went off a gold silver standard was, well, it began in 1717 with Isaac Newton, who started fixing the price of gold, or the ratio of gold to silver, and started basically meddling with the world's supply of money and what commodities should be used as money. And it created a lot of problems around the world. And while the world was basically transitioning from silver to bimetallic standard and eventually to gold and then to silver. So I would say that not necessarily. I don't think that gold is the end all and be all, and the standard of which we should have been on in the last 100 years or 100 years ago, but definitely a commodity of some sort.
You know, I want to take the time to point out that just because gold and silver have remained fairly steady in supply for some time, that doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case. To use the historical example, when
That's a
the
good point, too.
Spanish first made it over to the New World, especially after Cortez looted the Aztec Empire and Pizarro did the same with the Incans, there was a flood of gold into Europe, and especially Spain. It was so much that people didn't really know what to do with it all. The economy became very unstable, and of course it eventually recovered and everyone benefited from all that wealth, but it's far from a steady supply across the world. And in today's age, new mining techniques come into being as we start to learn to mine bodies outside of our atmosphere, comets and other planets and stuff like that. There will not always be a steady supply of this stuff, so it's good to take that into consideration.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good point. So I want to get back to Jackson and talking about Jackson because I personally really, one of my favorite presidents is Andrew Jackson. I know, Trail of Tears. I got it. Yeah, he did some bad things, but all presidents have done bad things. And I know this is particularly bad because it's a crime against humanity, but I did like his response to the banks, and I appreciated that. So to Jackson, the banks actually symbolized how a privileged class of businessmen oppressed the will of the common man of America. He made clear that he planned to challenge the constitutionality of the bank, and much to the horror of its supporters. In response, the director of the bank, Nicholas Biddle, flexed his own political power, turning to members of Congress, including the powerful Kentucky Senator Henry Clay, and leading businessmen sympathetic to the bank to fight Jackson. On September 10th, in 1833, Jackson removed all federal funds from the Second Bank of the U.S., redistributing them to various state banks, which were popularly known as pet banks. In addition, he announced that deposits to the bank would be accepted after October 1st. Finally, Jackson had succeeded in destroying the bank. Its charter officially expired in 1836. And of course, the banks were renewed shortly after Jackson's presidency. But banks were basically just a way for the government to control the economy. It was their way of teaming up with the Federal Reserve and controlling the economy so that they got to decide what people could trade in, and that gave them more control over individuals and businesses. What do you guys think? Am I right? Wrong? What?
Well, this is a bit of a side note, but it's interesting that they were renewed that quickly afterwards. As much as people talk about in the Fed, especially in the Liberty Movement, I do wonder if by some miracle that ever happened, how quickly it would be resumed the second the next political regime steps into place. It just seems like that would be history repeating itself, but maybe not. Who knows?
What do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that well, you mentioned the Federal Reserve, but the first central bank was actually not called the Federal Reserve.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, no problem. But yeah, I mean, I think that the first two central banks were actually pushed a lot by the bankers rather than the federal government. I may be off on that, but that's my impression. Is that the bankers were behind it a little bit more, but of course they could sell it to the federal government as, hey, with central bank you have more control of the money and you have more control of the people.
Oh, yeah. The government I think you're right. I think much like today, I think that there's a bunch of bigwigs who basically manipulate the government. And I mean, the government, it's their fault too, because the government is manipulated and they allow themselves to be manipulated by money instead of, serving the public, which is what they were supposed to do.
Well, men aren't angels.
I know, right? A is A. And so men are men and they do evil things. And the thing is that, but honestly, it's these powerful men that, it's lobbyists or bankers that just come in and they manipulate the government. Like, here you can have more control and here you can have more money. And they give them more control and money and they basically run rampant over our economy. I mean, Am I right or wrong here?
You could be right, but it's interesting to hear an objectivist going this crazy over big wigs controlling society and manipulating it to their heart's content.
Really? I mean, what's contradictory about that?
Oh, never mind.
Ayn Rand, actually, her biggest villains in her books were the rich. They were these, guys who manipulated their way into power and into wealth through lobbyists and other such things. I mean, a lot of her biggest villains were rich, and some of her greatest heroes were very poor. Like Howard Rourke was very poor.
I think it had less to do with their financial status in her books and more about how their fortunes or lack thereof were earned.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you see successful protagonists in Rand's literature. They're just all self-made people. They're prodigies, essentially. They're not people who have been in money for generations, for example.
Right. They are self-made, but they do it in a way that is noble. They take a craft and they do it to their very best ability. And that's what got me interested in objectivism in the first place, is that noble pursuit of your passion.
I think it's interesting, though, that you don't see that many people in the real world who have actually made that much money just pursuing their passion. Most of the time it is through government handouts.
Yeah, it's really sad because people are incapable of actually pursuing the things that they really love nowadays because it's too expensive to just eat. At this point, pursuing passions isn't really an option because the government has such a large stranglehold over our economy that how can you possibly even start a business? So good luck pursuing your passions because either A, there's not a business out there that, you can pursue your passions with, or B, you can't start a business that allows you to pursue your passions. And I think the fact that it's so hard to be an entrepreneur in our country really speaks to like how absolutely awful our economy is.
I thought we were supposed to be in recovery.
Who told you that?
Oh, I hear it all the time.
They lied to you.
I suspect if they repeated it enough, it might become true. That's how reality works, right?
I mean, Obama is still, got rainbows coming out of his butt, right?
I saw one the other day. It was really distracting in that press conference.
um, so, what do you think about the state of our economy, Stephen?
Oh, wow. I think that it's a huge mess. I mean, the stock market's at an all-time high, and yet people are not doing well. And, we still have high unemployment. Prices are at all-time highs. So I think that there is clear signs of trouble ahead in the next few years.
Now, I know I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs in Bitcoin and in metals, and a lot of people would say, that because entrepreneurs are doing well, that maybe the government isn't as bad as we think it is, and entrepreneurship isn't really that hard. What would you say to that, Stephen?
Ooh, well, I have to partly disagree. Entrepreneurship, I think, is pretty difficult. It requires a lot of discipline on an individual's part. But I would say that hmm, I do see a lot of hope in decentralizing technologies such as Bitcoin in the near future. I think that there's going to be a big race almost between economic collapse and kind of a economic survivor or economic savior. And I think that Bitcoin could definitely be the answer to that. But in the next few years, I don't think that Bitcoin has the ability, or at least in the next year, to, if something were to happen, like a bond market crash, for Bitcoin to save the day.
Yeah, you know what I think is really honestly that I think that the government that entrepreneurs for Bitcoin actually they did it so quickly, and Bitcoin took hold so quickly that the government didn't have time to put up walls and regulations to prevent all the progress that has happened. And that is the only reason that we're seeing so much entrepreneurship in Bitcoin and not as much outside.
It's interesting, Stephen, that you're not portraying Bitcoin as the savior of money that a lot of cryptocurrency enthusiasts seem to think it is. And I think the reason I really find that interesting is because you're a metal man who takes Bitcoin on you take Bitcoin on your website. Am I correct?
Yes, since 2012. And at one point, we were the largest Bitcoin retail business in the world. But I must say that I am actually a huge advocate of Bitcoin, and I do see it as a savior, in the future, but not necessarily in the next year or so.
Okay, but you're not
That's
just taking
fair.
it as another means of payment. You are actually investing somewhat in Bitcoin through your transactions.
Oh, absolutely. I think, referencing it to gold, I think that gold's time as money is over, in that either Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency of some form will be used as money in the near future.
So you don't think there's room for both metals and Bitcoin?
I think that metals will retain its purpose as a store of value, but not as money.
Huh. Well, that's sad.
Well, by
See,
that,
as an objectivist, I have an affinity for metals, so you're breaking my heart right now, just so you know, Stephen.
well, by that you do mean that it's going to still be valuable. It's just that it's not going to have the utility as a medium of exchange. Am I correct?
I want to trade gold.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think storing wealth off the block will become very important in the future. And of course, gold and silver will be just the perfect purpose for that. But as a medium of exchange, I think we're definitely past that. I think as an objectivist, I think Ayn Rand would be quite happy with a market choosing what our money should be.
Oh,
And
agreed. But I still
yeah.
miss gold. It's
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, the
still, that
gold
would be
isn't going
fun.
anywhere.
I mean,
It's definitely going to be around, but not necessarily as money,
yeah,
and that's quite okay.
understandable. But I still for me, it would be kind of fun to carry around gold doubloons and trade them and buy things with them. I mean, when we go to PorcFest, using gold and silver is probably one of the most fun and awesome things ever. It's so very inconvenient. It's really sad that it's so inconvenient, but oh my gosh, they're just so beautiful.
Be the change you wish to see in the world, Lauren. I got a bag of silver in my pocket right now.
I love you, Calvin. I really do. You're like my favorite human being. Of course, he has silver in his pocket.
Why do you not?
You are such a pirate. I don't, because I have no pockets. I am wearing a skirt.
That is a fair reason to not have stuff in your pockets.
I've got a
Fair
gypsy
enough.
skirt on right
Touche.
now because I like to be comfortable after a long day at work. So
Well, there's still nothing from keeping you keeping you from having a bag of silver in your purse. Yeah, just consider this.
that was welcome to True Objective, where we make inappropriate jokes.
But it's I'm glad you touched on what you were saying as far as a transaction medium, Stephen. That is what Bitcoin is becoming, and that's not really a new trend. Maybe it is with Bitcoin, but even as money has become progressively worthless throughout the last century, the next big advance that we've seen in banking over, at this point, a fairly long period of time, has actually been the extension of credit to people who aren't aristocrats and of the merchant class. Plastic was the first real innovation in that regard, I think. Checks are just so impractical by comparison. So, it just seems to me that Bitcoin is kind of the next step in that evolution of allowing distant transactions, of extending credit to people who otherwise can't afford serious banking systems. Where do you think Bitcoin has the potential of going in the future? You said you're playing the long game, of course. It's probably not going to be that useful in the next couple of years, but where do you see this ultimately taking us?
Well, I mean, if you look at, like you were talking, credit and the use of Bitcoin with smart contracts, then that is extremely powerful to be able to release a certain amount of money in the future based on a specific type of criteria. So I think that right now it's not just Bitcoin as money, but the technology behind it is revolutionary, and it's going to change everything from the internet to business to communication to government. So
Bitcoin government?
Of course, what's that?
Oh my God,
Bitcoin
government. No, government.
Well,
that's the thing. It'll become completely inefficient once we have Bitcoin and advances in technology. We won't even need a government. Techno anarchy! Yay!
Well, I mean, one example is decentralizing the way people vote. So you can put voting on the blockchain, replace the idea of one Bitcoin with one vote, and everyone has one vote. So it will instantly prevent any kind of ballot stuffing or fraud or manipulation with voting. Of course, who knows if people are doing that now.
That's actually something
and I'm
that,
sure that there are recent examples in human history of ballot stuffing and whatnot, but that will instantly be able to prevent any kind of voting fraud.
That's interesting. I really like that.
That's actually something that our previous primary gubernatorial candidate for the Republican Party, Andrew Hemingway, up here in New Hampshire, talked about a fair bit. That was one of his long-term policy platforms, if I'm not mistaken, was to put voting on the blockchain, and he still lost by a pretty good margin. So,
oh no, he got 40%. That's quite a bit for a Liberty candidate.
I suppose it's good for a Liberty candidate, but
really
nonetheless,
is.
it seems like we're still a ways away from the world being ready for that. Although I welcome it with every coming day. Don't get me wrong, but that definitely does seem like one of the longer term applications. It's interesting that this has so much potential outside of just financial transactions. It seems like it can be used as an arbiter for any sort of interaction between people over long distance or close up, for that matter.
Yes. So actually going back to money, with Bitcoin, people can trade 24/7. That's never been a possibility before. So, if I'm in the US, I can trade with someone at 3 a.m. in the morning. I don't have to wait for the banks to open. So I think that, not, I mean, time is money. And just thinking of how much time that Bitcoin will save, where people can trade 24/7,
In safety.
anything,
I mean,
anywhere in the world. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
and think about safety. I mean, first of all, you won't have to go to an ATM late at night, which is like really unsafe. I mean, really, really, really unsafe, especially in some areas. And luckily at my bank, they make you put in your debit card to get in the door. So it's like a pass key too. So you're safe while you're pulling money out. But as soon as you walk out the door, I mean, it's fair game. And you know, it's a lighted room. You can see somebody in there. You could just wait for somebody outside. So anyway, the point is that also it's very difficult to steal, a key. Almost, I would say it's close enough to, it's so difficult. It's close enough to impossible that I could go ahead and call it impossible. And then, you know, and they're working on greater encryptions right now for the day when that actually becomes an issue. So they're already working ahead. And then, you know, I mean, it's so easy to steal somebody's wallet, especially if you have the element of force on your side, you know, AKA guns or knives or any of those sort of things. My favorite is definitely blow darts with poison tips. Those are my favorite. That's my weapon of choice. I'm totally
Poisoned many people recently?
Yes. I mean, you know me. I'm always going around poisoning people, but
Oh, different strokes.
I have an affinity for different interesting weapons. I wanted to be a ninja growing up, so
We all wanted to be a ninja.
yeah. So I have like throwing knives and blow dart guns and stuff that I play around with sometimes at home.
I prefer firearms, but you know.
Oh
whatevs.
yeah, don't even get me started on that. I grew up hunting, so but the point is that Bitcoin keeps and it has an element of safety that currency will absolutely never have, and I can't think of another currency that's nearly as safe as Bitcoin.
Well, you say it's hard to steal, and in a sense it is. Physically, it is fairly difficult to get your hands on. But on the other hand, don't we know in the FSP community, or at least I do, quite a few people who have had their accounts hacked in the past. There are still there are a few.
And I know some people as well.
It's just a different. It's not that it's any safer. It's just that it's a different type of security that you have to become accustomed to. If you don't follow proper protocol and just wave your codes around like an idiot, then yeah, you're gonna get hacked. And,
Yeah, I think those are people that made mistakes and wave their codes around like idiots.
well, you could also make the argument that somebody who goes and gets money from the ATM late at night and then gets robbed made a mistake and acted like an idiot. Human error is a feature of transactions.
I mean, it depends. Do I really need money right now? Like, say it's late at night and I need to get cash to get medicine for my family, and they like really need this medicine, and I have to go to the ATM and get cash. I mean, it wasn't my stupidity. It was just, you know, it was like a basic issue. And I know a lot of people are like debit card or, you know, credit card, but like, I mean, think of a situation. There could be a situation where you absolutely have to go to the ATM and have to go there at night, and it's absolutely necessary. And I mean, in these cases, everyone accepting Bitcoin could really, really save everything and everyone. I just think it's way safer, and people don't get mugged walking down the streets in, you know, New York City or Chicago or, oh gosh, Detroit, with Bitcoin wallets. They do with, you know, credit cards, debit cards, cash.
You know, another thing I'd like to point out, which is a little bit different, is that the dirtiest thing we touch every day.
Oh God, I
is
go
money.
over this every time. Every time. It is so disgusting. I mean, think about the places that people, I mean,
So-
have you seen the video? I obviously can't say the word on air, but the ASS pennies. Have you seen that video? Oh my God.
Do tell.
You have to see this thing. It's a YouTube video, and basically the idea is that this guy puts pennies in his rear end just to, you know, make himself feel more powerful when he's talking when he goes for an interview because he thinks to himself, this person has probably touched my butt pennies. And I'm like, yeah, no more currency for me.
Up until I was about
Bitcoin.
5, I used to suck on pennies because I liked the taste of copper as a kid.
Oh.
It's weird, but yeah,
So,
I never got sick with any bodies of coli or anything. So
Yeah,
Maybe
so
that was before the
applying
butt
that
pennies.
to Bitcoin, I mean, once we start using Bitcoin rather than dollars and pennies, then we start or stop sending bacteria around as much and other diseases. So Bitcoin essentially increases our life expectancy by once we start using it.
Oh, I love this. I really do. Stephen, you and I are going to do a whole article together. We're going to co-author an article about how Bitcoin increases life expectancy. That's genius. Anybody not listening right now is totally missing out on this amazing argument right here.
But
that was such a great. I mean, it wasn't even that big of a stretch. That was great. Kudos to you.
But it's much harder to snort cocaine with a cell phone with
Did you just
Bitcoin
mention
on it.
cocaine on
I
our
did just
show?
mention cocaine. You need
Oh,
dollar bills for that sort
God.
of thing. You
That
you
just
can't
happened.
use a cell phone with Bitcoin information on it too.
True objective
coke.
first. We just
True.
mentioned drugs.
True, but then you're not putting, paper up your nose that is diseased or has bacteria on it.
Fair enough.
Now you have to go and buy something that has is sanitary.
Good God, man. This is really happening.
Don't act like you never considered this before, Lauren.
No, I don't particularly snort things. It's not really one of those things that I do.
Not even Altoids.
No. Can you do that?
Oh, you can.
I don't want to. You know what? I don't want to know. So let's see what else we got. I know next show we want to talk about some of the different currencies in different countries, and if anyone out there wants to see any particular country, I mean, we have limited time, but if you want to send us, if you want to write on our Facebook page or this event page and tell us what it is which countries you would like to see, I mean, you should totally do that. Do you have any suggestions, Stephen? Like
Doge.
There's no Doge country, okay? I
There
know
should be.
you all think that there is and should be, but it
Stephen,
doesn't
when will you
exist.
start accepting Doge for gold and
Oh
silver?
my God.
Well, we started accepting it last year.
Did you
but,
really?
Yeah, but we actually stopped because for several different reasons. But and now there are talks. I haven't actually followed too much about possibly linking or chaining Dogecoin to Litecoin, kind of like Namecoin is to Bitcoin. So if that happens and they strengthen their their infrastructure, then I think we would start accepting it again.
I can't imagine you had very many purchases going on in Doge anyway. I mean, most middle school kids aren't typically the ones buying gold and silver in the first place.
We did
Hey,
have
I have
a good
2,000
number,
Doge.
but,
Yeah, that's like, what, 3 cents?
It was not like Bitcoin.
No, it's not like Bitcoin. But I mean, they do call Pork Fest Doge Fest. That's a joke. It's a Shire Dude joke. If you haven't checked out my friend's show, Shire Dude, it's amazing and hilarious and very strange, and it's like a ridiculous trip through the mind of a mad scientist. But he's awesome, and you should check him out. So let's see, what else do we have on this list?
I mean, going back to banking, one thing you may be
Oh, yeah.
interested in looking into are the Rothschilds. Really interesting history of how they basically moved from country to country to set up banks in all the different countries. And during the Napoleonic Wars, they were funding both sides of the war. They were giving loans to both the British and the French. And I'm not too big on conspiracy theories, especially what they're up to today. But it's just really interesting to see their rise to power in the 17 and 1800s.
So that was actually a safe investment, betting on both sides of a war. I would worry about losing more money than I gained, but I guess that really depends on the specifics.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So something that we touched upon before that I just wanted to briefly go back to is wasn't the Federal Reserve created with the express purpose of creating an elastic currency, which is one that could grow and shrink as time demanded? And of course, everyone knows how much they print money, but has there ever been a case of them destroying money? It is well within their power. It's an explicitly legislated ability that they have, if I'm not mistaken. Has that it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they destroy money.
Do they?
Yeah,
I don't mean melting down, destroying old bills that have just gotten so worn out that they create more in their place. I mean, have they ever actually just taken a large section of cash or coin or whatever and just done away with it?
Oh no, they just take they shred money that's old, and I think they replace it all the time.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I've never heard of an instance where they didn't replace it. But yeah, I mean, my friend George, he likes to go get the shredded dollars and like show them off at some of the libertarian events. So, but no, do you know of any instances where they actually don't replace it, Stephen?
Well, to talk about the elasticity, I think that's how they sold a Federal Reserve to the public.
Saying they can get rid of it and
Yeah,
just never did.
Yeah, I mean that was I think one of the big selling points to the public, because before then the public was very opposed to a central bank. But I think that yes, during it was I think it was accidental. They weren't trying, and Milton Friedman goes over this with the Great Depression. What they were saying that was that the central bank didn't do enough. And I mean, there was a huge contraction of the money supply. And like I said, and they said it was because the central bank wasn't doing enough. Now, of course, there is a difference between the monetary base and the velocity of money, which when you add it all together, is the money supply. And we're kind of seeing that now. There's a huge, not huge, but there's a bit, the money supply isn't expanding today as much as it should be because banks aren't lending. People aren't lending money. And so we see this huge expansion of the monetary base, but not the money supply.
Interesting.
So where's it all going? Just staying in the banks?
Yeah, as far as I know, I mean, what they're doing is they're or have been doing is buying all these toxic assets from these banks, like Goldman's or institutions like Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan, and then the banks, of course, have to make money by lending this money out, but they're too scared to. And so that's why we haven't really seen that much inflation right now. That's why, at least in my view, it's part of the reason why gold is so cheap right now. It's dropping like a rock, or has been over the last few weeks.
So you're saying that part of what's going to happen when the economy recovers, if it does, is we're suddenly going to see hyperinflation?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Possibly not hyperinflation, but definitely something like the 70s, where inflation got up to, 12 to 18%.
Good Lord.
Interesting. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and I definitely, and the Federal Reserve publishes their own research, and you can look at the monetary base over the last 10 years, and it just has skyrocketed straight up exponentially. And you look at the money supply, and it hasn't done that because people are scared.
Maybe a little healthy fear is a good thing in this circumstance.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, we actually have about 5 minutes left. So is there anything else that you guys want to talk about in the remaining 5 minutes? Like anything you want to pitch on money or anything interesting? We'll definitely be talking about, I definitely want to add the Rothschilds into our next show. So for our next show, the lineup will be talking about the gold standard and losing the gold standard, the Rothschilds, the other currencies in other countries and how they inflated, and our inflation, and of course Bitcoin. But that'll probably be the fourth show. And I want to try and get a bunch of the Bitcoin people on, and we'll just have a big Bitcoin show, and it'll be really fun. But is there anything else that you guys really want to talk about in the last 4 minutes?
Well, you mentioned gold standard, and I know I briefly mentioned it before, but the big standard that the market chose was silver, and it was quite sad to see how silver was demonetized through Gresham's law, which is an economic principle based on on government intervention on how they were price setting the difference between gold and silver.
To explain, was that the one where they were maintaining a constant distance between the two?
Yeah, so in the 1600s, one of the world powers was Great Britain, and their currency was called the British pound sterling, based on a pound of sterling silver, because that was their monetary system was silver, not gold, and that's how they settled most transactions. And then Isaac Newton became master of the Royal Mint, I think, and in 1717, he should have stuck to calculus because he was the guy who started to screw it all up. In 1717, he said, okay, there must be a specific ratio of gold to silver, and I think it was something like 15.5 to 1. So 15.5 ounces of silver would buy 1 ounce of gold.
That seems fairly arbitrary. Is there any reason he came up with that particular number that you know of?
Yeah.
He just pulled that out of a hat somewhere.
Don't. I mean, if you look at FDR and you see what he was saying about during the Great Depression and how he chose interest rates, he just woke up in the morning and chose a lucky number, and that was the number he chose as the interest rate. So I don't know if Isaac Newton had an idea of what it should be based on the market or what. But of course, when you create price controls, there may be a point in time when a certain amount of silver is equal to a certain amount of gold, because
You there, Stephen?
I think we may have lost him, which is highly unfortunate.
Oh no!
Because this is our last 2 minutes, 1 minute in the show.
Oh goodness!
So, Stephen? Nope. Okay. So, I just want to go ahead and quickly tell you all where you can find us. So, Calvin, find you on liberty.me. Why don't you tell them about that?
Absolutely can. Calvin Thompson on liberty.me. Send me a friend request or whatever they call the equivalent there. I will definitely add you. I've written a couple of articles. Happy to do more when I get the time.
And you can find me at Objectivist Girl on Facebook or objectivistgirl.com. Also, you can check out my show, my live show on the Voluntary Virtues Network at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays. And of course, True Objective premieres at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on every Monday. Wow, I do so many shows I'm forgetting. And of course, make sure that you check out more from our guest and check out Amagi Metals. And of course, he also is the board member at the Individuals for Capitalism and alumni board at the Freedom for Economic Education. So make sure you check out all of those organizations, and we will see you next week. Have a great day. And remember, knowledge is not for all men, but for those who seek it. So keep seeking.